So you may have heard some new developments on the Universal Ostrich Farm situation that's happening in Edgewood, BC. This is obviously just a sad, devastating moment in Canada that farmers have to battle it out with the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and the RCMP to save precious ostriches, how they're being vilified, how they're being treated, how we show you that 22 Minutes was doing a completely just gut-wrenching, disgusting, deplorable sketch going against the Universal Ostrich Farm. And now 2 arrests have been made, according to Rebel News here. It says 2 Ostrich Farm supporters arrested as concern over CFIA's care for the bird's growth. So there's been a lot of tension on how now the Food Inspection Agency has control over these ostriches, how they're actually maintaining the health of these birds, because they're claiming that they need to take control over the health and life of these birds because the Universal Ostrich Farm owners have not followed through on their agreements when it comes to getting checked out and when it comes to the avian flu, which is absolutely a lie. It's an absolute lie. They have been tested. They show no symptoms. They know that they're trying to scare them with the avian flu, which is just absolutely hoax. And they're taking control of these animals because what the ostriches were doing was actually providing antibodies for the avian flu. So there was symptoms beforehand. They have since recovered. The birds are healthy. They've been healthy for for a while now. And the RCMP and the CFIA, it's so deeply corrupted, is still pledging to go in full steam and cull these animals who they deemed is unsafe for the general public, which is absolutely a lie. So here is here's the Canadian Press. They did a little short segment on it, on the 2 arrests. Take a look.
So I can confirm that 2 people have been arrested under the Health of Animals Act. The RCMP are here at the request of the lead agency, the CFIA, to assist them in executing a lawful search warrant on a property on a farm. 2 individuals refused to leave the property and were subsequently arrested. Our primary role here is to keep the peace and to enforce the law if necessary. We are here to secure the property and to ensure the safety of not only the public but also the CFIA officers while they conduct their business.
Karen and Katie were planning.
So, according to the RCMP officer, they had to arrest the 2 individuals because they were trespassing on the property that was seized by the CFIA, and they were caught feeding the birds. And they said that it was damaging to the safety of not the birds, but the officers. The officers that are seizing over this farmland, that's took this farm ransom and hostage away from the farm owners. It's their safety that matters, not the birds, not the actual objects that you're supposed to deal and take care of, not the livestock that you're occupying. But no, it's the officer's safety that's of concern. That's why they got arrested.
To be arrested over here. And then I got a phone call from her about 20 minutes ago or so, just a little, maybe half hour ago. She said, hey, they let us go feeding. So they were going out feeding and they got arrested in the back corner where nobody is. You know, we're supposed to have trust. We were starting to build some trust. And that happens.
So that's their little take of it. Just absolutely disgusting, devastating. Like, these are 2 individuals that their only committed crime is, they breached the barrier of the closed off space that they're housing these ostriches, that they're putting in a pen. But all they did was they fed the ostriches. They're feeding the birds. That's their only committed crime. And they got arrested for it. Just absolutely crazy. So one of the people is a guy by the name of Jim Kerr. who's a longtime farm enthusiast. He's a supporter. He's been a supporter of the Universal Ostrich Farm outreach since this conflict started, and he has been there, throughout this whole situation. He was one of the ones that got arrested because he went around to the one side of the barrier that the CFIA officers were not there to apprehend the birds. So Jim Kerr was going around to feed the birds. They arrested him, saying that he was breaching the barrier, and he was subjugated to a crime of feeding the birds. That's literally what it came down to. So here's his little explanation about this. And it just seems so very fishy that not only this, lawless tactic to go after this farm after, just the absolute scandal that is exposing just how deeply corrupted the Liberal government is, the BC government is, the CFIA, the health ministers, and they're trying to do this specifically because these birds in particular were being studied and being reviewed as holding potential antibodies to the avian flu strain. So this could be, and even RFK Jr. has talked about it, Dr. Oz has talked about it, these birds could be essential to the study of natural remedies and antibodies and therapeutics that could treat people with the avian flu. And we know that the avian flu has been ramped up, much like all the other, viruses that are coming out to scare people, to fearmonger people, in support for big pharmaceuticals, i.e. vaccines. And that is one of the reasons why there is so much emphasis and force to go after these birds, because they don't want the actual science involved in these ostriches to be leaked out. But here's what Jim Kerr says.
Well, folks, evidently I'm not detained. That's kind of cool, eh? I wanted to come on here and talk to you a little bit about what happened yesterday, and kind of give you the lowdown. I'm gonna start with what I was charged with. I was charged with contravening Section 35 of the Animal Health Act. Now, when you read that, and you should, it has something to do with you have to give proper information to any of the officers or agents, or you can't give misleading information or something like that. Read it. It's really interesting. I'm not sure why that has anything to do with anything. And then the other charge was obstruct justice. Obstruct police, obstruct justice. And I'm going to give you the parameters around each of these. As far as the Animal Health Act, Section 35 of the Animal Health Act, I believe, and I haven't got confirmation from the police, but I believe it has something to do with the video where I was on top of the truck, outside of the pens, and I saw the food that was like almost within reach of the birds. There's so many trying to get it. They were 3 deep. There's probably 20-something birds there, I think. And they were all trying to get their heads through the fences to try to eat the grain. A couple of things went through my head. Number one, are these birds going to hurt themselves? They got their necks all the way through the thing trying to reach the food. So that was a concern. I was concerned that they were going to hurt themselves. Another concern was they were starving. I mean, these birds, I've been here for what?
So you could see how just awful this is. How awful this is. How intentional all this is. So they got this pen where they're keeping the ostriches. They got a barrier where the pen is, but they also got blue fencing to keep the people away from the ostriches. So there's about maybe, I don't know, couple feet between the pen and the blue fencing. And that's where they're distributing the grain and the food that the ostriches are supposed to be eating. But if you notice, the ostriches can't reach to that grain. They can't reach to the food, and they're starving. So the CFIA is doing this intentionally. They're doing this intentionally. They're not feeding directly to the birds. They're not placing the grain within the pen so that the birds have access to this food. They're purposely throwing the food in this area between the pen and the fence so that the birds can't reach to the food. And what Jim Kerr was doing, you could see, he jumped off his truck and he starts trying to feed the birds. This is apparently his only crime that they had to arrest him. They had to charge him what they say, obstructing justice. Obstructing justice and violating animal code for feeding the birds. Feeding. There's more.
Since April, and I've watched the behavior of these birds. I've seen how they operate. I've seen, how they feed. And it's never been like this. You don't get 20 birds scrambling over a little pile of food like this, because generally they're being given, what are they given? 12 5-gallon buckets a day, right? No, 24.
I thought it was 26.
26 5-gallon buckets a day. So clearly that food has not been given. If it has, we sure as haven't seen it. And we see everybody, the birds are running anytime there's food and clamoring around the front. So when I went there, I specifically, and if you go back and watch the video, and I encourage you to do so that you'll actually know what happened, I specifically didn't go past the police line. There's a yellow tape that says police line. And then there's some, nondescript blue fencing. I guess what they're saying is that that blue fence, you're not supposed to go beyond. Now, that's kind of interesting. I wish I could, and maybe we'll do this at some point, compile all the other evidence that shows what the deal is here. We have seen police pass that line. So that to me tells me that if it's a quarantine zone and there's some kind of problem with that happening, that the police probably shouldn't be doing that. I mean, I'm just guessing. Here's what I did wrong, and here's why you guys should not attempt to feed the birds. Okay, I know it might be unpopular, but I know why now. And I spoke to the police. Okay, yeah, I know, don't speak to the police, but I was speaking to the police. I was under arrest. I need clarification. So the food is clearly not being given. I felt I had to give it. I pushed it underneath the police line while staying behind the police line very carefully, and got up a guy. The police were there. I mean, I was on the truck waving to them. They didn't have a problem with it. And then the next day, they kind of surprised me. And, I'm going to jump to that now. When they were arresting me, I was at the front gate, and I was right at the edge of the family's property. I saw 2 police officers kind of coming towards me a little bit aggressively. And I instinctively panicked. I mean, I guess I backed up. I don't know. I didn't see it. That's what the cops say. They say I backed up. So for backing up before they apprehended me and grabbed my hands, put me behind, I said, I'm not resisting, whatever, and I went with them. But they gave me an obstruct of justice, an obstructive police, because I backed up before they arrested me. Now, I don't remember backing up. I could totally see that I did that because, I was nervous. I saw a bunch of cops coming at me. Last time that happened, I got my thumb broke. I got thrown to the ground by cops, up again, thrown down again, and got detained for hours and hours, self-tightening handcuffs where I had numbness in my hands for 6 months after that. So you can understand why I might have been a little traumatized when I saw police running after me.
So apparently he got the obstruction of justice charge because he took a step back because the cops are coming after him. He took a step back, and apparently that's obstructing justice because he felt nervous, and rightfully so. These are cops arresting someone for feeding a bird, for feeding animals. To this entire scandal that makes absolutely no sense, no logical sense, can argue what the CFIA is doing to these poor ostriches is correct. No argument can be made on a positive note of what's happening here. This is a complete, utter devastation. This is a capture of a farm that's been raising these animals for generations. Generations. That now they have captured that entire farm. They have pushed away the farm owners from interacting with these birds that they have raised. And they have gotten CFIA officers. They got the RCMP. They got fencing all around. They're telling people to get away. They're arresting people for feeding the animals. And they're restricting the food to the animals. So rightfully so, Jim Kerr did what he did because he knew the math was completely off in the fact that they only got, 26 5-gallon jugs a day? You know there's over 300 birds on that farm. Over 300. You're telling me that 26 5-gallon jugs is supposed to feed that many animals a day? That's crazy. That's crazy. So they're purposely starving these birds. They're purposely, intentionally devaluing these birds. And my assumption, my suspicion is that they're purposely doing that so that if the bird dies off spontaneously from their malfeasance, the CFIA and the RCMP can then look at that and say, well, they died because of the avian flu. Not because of their mishandling of the situation. But they could just make up an excuse to say, that's why we had to come in. That's why we're saving the birds, because so many of these birds are dying from a viral outbreak that it's magically not affecting pigeons or seagulls or any other birds across this country, not even Canadian geese. I thought it's the avian flu. It's amazing that no other birds affected except for these ostriches, chicken, and cattle. That's right, cattle are being called for avian flu. And go figure that cattle and chicken are two proteins that human beings eat. Go figure.
So they take me in the backfield, they end up taking me over to the pit, and they want me to sign conditions. Now, I'd already predetermined I was not going to be signing the conditions, especially if they were any kind of onerous conditions, like not being able to use social media, house arrest, whatever, all that stuff. They didn't. The conditions that they offered, which I initially said no to, but then I said yes to, was I can't contact CFIA agents, I can't go to CFIA offices, like I'd ever want to do that. Why would I? So that wasn't a problem. So I wasn't going to sign if there was all these onerous conditions. But the other condition that they did have that I did sign, and it's the reason where I am right now, is that I can't be on the farm. There's a geographic area around the farm. It goes to like the creek, Highway 6, up a couple of roads or whatever. It's basically, a long stretch, probably a couple of K and a K wide or whatever, in and around the farm. I'm not allowed to be there. They don't let me go there. So I ended up signing those conditions so that I could get out and continue reporting. Ladies and gentlemen, if that food was in any way contaminated or poisoned or in one way or another made the bird sick, I wouldn't have known about it because I just saw grain there. I expected, I don't know, maybe the CFIA threw it too far. Who knows? I don't know where the grain came from, but that was a mistake because I could have, if it was bad grain or whatever, the birds could have been hurt. And the CFIA right now is under charge of the birds. So if anything happens to the birds, if they get sick or they die or whatever, it's all on the CFIA. But if we go in there and just feed and then they get sick, well, then it's now our responsibility because we did it. Now, that's why we're not allowed to do that. And that's why I would suggest, even though so many of you have said, I do the same thing, thank you for doing it, blah, blah, blah. I appreciate that. And it felt to me to be the right thing at the time. However, I can see why now it caused problems. Okay, so I want to address that right away.
So that's an interesting argument to make. That's an interesting take. Because he's talking about, well, he had to sign, he had to say to the cops that he wasn't going to, be on the premises and he was going to do that, whatever. That's, what do you got to do to get out of being arrested and possibly sent to prison. But the fact that he was feeding the animals and they made the argument that, well, what if the grain was contaminated or the grain wasn't good and you could be potentially harming these birds and ostriches. And he makes that point. But the argument still is to be made in the fact that it is in the hands of the CFIA. It's no longer the responsibility of the farm owners because you drove them away. You put in a warrant and a property seizure on their farm. It is now in your hands. So it's the CFIA's responsibility to examine and inspect the grain that they're feeding to make sure it's safe for the birds. So it would be on their hands, not the farmers, not people like Jim Kerr. It'd be on their hands. So it's just so crazy that this man is being arrested for the simple act of feeding the animals because the CFIA is purposely starving these animals. They're spraying the grain too far away for these birds to actually reach out and get the food. And they're diminishing their ability because, again, they can then use the excuse. This is all trying to drive up a narrative that these birds are contaminated, that they're dying off, that these farmers are psychotic and not treating these animals properly. So the CFI, the government has to come in, take over this farm. Stuff happens to the ostriches. We can't do anything about it. It's obviously the avian flu. And they can just make up that excuse. It's absolutely horrific what they're doing here. So here's this Shareware Canada. Gives us this update. So October 7th, 2025, Ostriches 101. The ostriches are not eating enough. They are social animals. They are confused and stressed. At October 18th, the animals have now been forced out of their front pen, so the family is not able to observe. So they had the original pen in which Katie Sidney was, who was the farm owner who raised these ostriches, can able to observe what the officers are doing. But they intentionally moved the pen away so that she would not be able to see the harm that they are doing to the ostriches. They did that intentionally. The animals have been moved out of front pen so the family is not able to observe. A punishment by the CFIA regarding Jim Kerr's arrest for breaching the blue fence border yesterday. So, they are purposely mistreating the animals, as they're claiming that the owners of Universal Farms were mistreating the animals. They were actually on the right. They spoke out with veterinarians. They got the birds tested. They came back negative. They have proven that fact. They were bringing it to court. The CFIA refused to acknowledge it. The RCMP refuses to acknowledge it. The Liberal government, the BC government, they're all refusing. David Eby, who's the premier of BC, they're all refusing this because they're all complicit to the main goal agenda that this is reflecting on big pharmaceuticals, that these ostriches are not a danger to human health, but could actually be a benefit to human health. They're doing studies about antibodies. They're doing studies about natural therapeutics coming from these ostriches to protect animals from the avian flu. But they can't allow that to happen. So they came to this wild accusation, this wild goose chase to put an arrest warrant onto this family and just cause utter devastation. So there's a video attached to this. I'm not going to show. Well, maybe we'll show a little bit of it. We'll speed it up for people. So here's Katie Piscini informing people about the update. So let's see.
Hi, so I'm back. Katie with Universal Ostrich Farm. When we have an interim stay order, our animals are not supposed to be herded and touched. We're supposed to be caring for these animals as we would care for these animals, and we're having a problem with that. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, please. These animals need bedding, food, and their water. We would never push our animals out of these front pens because back where they are pushing them, they don't have shelter, they don't have water. And here we have them over here.
So she just said we would not push them from the front pen because they don't have access to food and or water and shelter. The CFIA officers know this. They know this. They have eyes and ears. They've been on the premises for weeks now, almost months. They've been constantly doing this. So they know that the back pen does not have access to water, doesn't have access to shelter. And again, who's in the wrong here? They're claiming that this woman is mistreating the animals, that she should be charged with animal cruelty and abuse. Meanwhile, CFIA officers are deliberately moving the pen away from access to water and shelter, which is necessary for these birds.
Tying up the fences and locking these ones in this pen. And now I'm going to hope, CFIA, that you guys are, just because you don't want to deal with this front corner, that you are feeding them over there. And this is the reason I'm hoping that you're doing this, because you're feeding them over there. 26 5-gallon buckets. Let's just remember that. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, they get 26 5-gallon buckets. Especially with the colder weather coming, they need more grain. They need their alfalfa. It's more than half of their diet. And these animals are not to be neglected. Oh, look, he's getting pecked. Oh, yeah. Sorry. You get him, girl. That's right. And they love pecks. That's why it's so funny. They love to peck. They peck an average of 4,000 times a day. And that is their sense. Their senses. They feel, they taste, It is something that we miss a lot. A lot.
Well, there's another brown one.
So there's just a bit of it there. I'm not going to show the full thing because it's like 16 minutes long, but the more coverage I've seen of this is just absolutely heartbreaking. Just utter abuse of animals, abuse of agriculture and farming, and abuse of Canadians. Like how much we've seen in the last few years when it came to COVID, when it came to the lockdowns, when it came to beating up people in the street because they weren't complicit of wearing a mask or, standing 6 feet apart or not abiding to the mandates and so on. And we're still continuing it. It's an atrocity. What's happening here. that they're defying against Canadians, defying against a farm that's been doing this for generations because they believe that the birds have avian flu, a suspicious flu that doesn't affect any other bird except for apparently ostriches, chickens, and beef. Yeah, I don't think it's much of the avian flu as we think it is. Just like how we don't believe that, demonizing farmers for emitting greenhouse gases and fertilizers is somehow causing the planet's destruction. Methinks it has something to do with the fact that they're against agriculture. Methinks it has something to do with Bill Gates. Methinks it has something to do with the fact that they want you to swallow down bugs as directed by the WEF and Beyond Beef, which is synthetically made proteins made in a laboratory, not actual raised farms with love and support and honesty, but synthetic chemicals down your throat. Just like big pharmaceuticals, which is all connected into this. So here's just to show people this. This is the warrant papers. This is the documents that the CFIA is putting on this farm to seize their property. So this is from September 3rd of 2025. And I want to go down to this part here. So the first count of why they're doing this arrest warrant says on or between December 11, 2024 to December 28, 2024, Universal Ostrich Farms Incorporated have ownership or possession, care, or control of an animal, failed to notify the nearest veterinary inspector of the presence of a reportable disease or toxic substance. That's a lie. That's a lie. They have confirmed that the birds are healthy. They have confirmed that the birds are not showing any symptoms. These are healthy livestock. So that's the CFIA lying on official court documents to take control of this farm. In or in fact indicating its presence in or around the animal immediately after becoming aware of the presence or fact contrary to Section Health of Animals Act, blah, blah, blah. And the second count says fail to comply with conditions of a notice on or between December 28, 2024 to February 26, 2025, Universal Ostrich Farm failed to comply with a notice requirement to quarantine in such manner that quarantine was breached, to wit, ostriches were not segregated by age and sex, fencing was not secure, personal protective equipment was not worn in the quarantine area, biocontaminant protocols were not observed, wildlife was not prevented from commingling with ostriches, daily mortality logs were not provided to the CFIA, and permits were not sought for the movement of things off and on the quarantine area, contrary to Section 91.4. But again, this is all a lie. This is all a lie because they have proven that the birds are healthy. They want to take this to court to prove and testify that they went through the requirements. They did the testing. The birds don't have any symptoms, so they're healthy as can be. So there's no need for this. There's no need for this whatsoever. But they still want to fearmonger people to say that the farmers are crazy lunatics that don't know how to take care of their livestock, and the government has to come in and seize control of the farm. And now they're the ones. Now they're the ones abusing the animals. How does that make you feel? How does it make you feel? The Food Inspection Agency failing to take care of animals. Do you feel safer? Do you feel safer now that this is the agency responsible for inspecting our food to make sure it's healthy? They're not making sure the ostriches are healthy. So should I trust them regarding our food? Considering there's so much processed chemicals and sugars and other additives that are potential poisons to our bodies? It all comes into play. So And this is ushered by people like her. This woman here. Who goes, this is Marjorie Michelle, who is now the Minister of Health for the Mark Carney Liberal government. She's the Minister of Health, and she was asked by Ezra Levant of Rebel News about the ostrich farm. And as Ezra Levant, I'm giving credit to this. I know I've said things in the past, is reporting on Israel and being a Zionist shill. It's very questionable, but that's a totally different situation we can get into. But I give credit to this. I give credit to Ezra Levant and Rebel News for asking this simple question. And the health minister just froze. Completely silent, stone silent on the massacre that's happening at this farm. So here's Ezra Levant asking a basic, simple question to the health minister, and she doesn't say a word.
Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich.
So he first thanks her for allowing Rebel News to ask the question. Because we know that the Liberal government, particularly with Mark Carney now, are very heinous against independent media. They attacked Rebel News. They attacked Juno News during the election. And they're purposely going after independent media and podcasters and people outside of the mainstream networks as they're propping up places like the CBC that lied to you, that did that awful, horrific sketch on 22 Minutes mocking the ostriches and the farm owners. They're trying to prop up that, but they want to demonize someone like Ezra Levant who's asking a simple question like this.
Ostrich Farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me.
And that right there is why this is all happening. That right there reveals all this. That these ostriches had avian flu. They recovered. They're healthy as can be right now. And they want to do studies on these birds. They want to do studies to see if there's any way to bring the antibodies of these ostriches into natural therapeutics. And, of course, that goes directly against big pharmaceuticals, which we know the Canadian government is deeply complicit of. Deeply. They're telling people right now to get another COVID booster. Again, they want you to get another COVID booster because they work so well. They work so well that you have to get annual boosters or even semi-annual. Hell, let's just make it daily because they just work so well for people. But this is too much. This is too much. This is why the government needs to come in and make a complete, utter disgrace in handling ostriches. So let's go back a bit and we'll start from the beginning.
Thank you, Minister, for agreeing to accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the state.
Did you notice that she was giggling when he mentions ostrich farm? Look at this.
To accredit Rebel News. I very much appreciate your dedication to freedom of the press. I have a question about the ostrich farm. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to ask about the lawsuit because I don't want you to.
She giggles, she smirks, and shakes her head. The minute he mentions ostrich farm. So she knows what he's talking about. She knows exactly what this conversation is about. But watch her just being stone silent about this issue that has become mainstream attention because people are upset, they're angered, and completely justifiably angry on how atrocious this is.
Talk about anything that are before the courts. But there was a letter, and I noticed in the statement you talk about Canada-U.S. cooperation. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your U.S. counterpart, has written saying he thinks that there's some medical research value in these ostriches because they had avian flu, but then have recovered and are now immune. In fact, he's offered to do the research and even to pay for it. It seems to me that we need allies around Trump's cabinet table. And if you could throw him a bone and say, sure, Secretary Kennedy, you can study these birds, it's sort of no skin off Canada's nose. And don't you think it would be helpful to have an ally in Trump's cabinet when we're doing our trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
So, not even her responding to that. Some other guy just says, next question. Move along. Not a word. Not a single word. Just a simple question of, hey, RFK Jr. is willing to do studies. We should reach out to America. You know, we could actually build a proper relationship if we actually reach out to America. But of course, we are not ever going to do that. We're never going to do that because this is all about dividing. This is all about conquering. This is all about propaganda and fear-mongering. They want you to be despised with America so that Canada could do the exact opposite, even if America's on the right side of things. And I saw that specifically when Florida, the state of Florida, announced that they were going to relieve parents not having mandates on their children. The parents get to decide, to get to see the vaccination schedule of their children. I thought that's a pretty good idea. Like, let the parents research. Let the parents be able to decide the judgment and fate of their child. That should be, like, common cause, don't you think? But in Canada, they did the exact opposite. They looked at what happened in Florida and said, oh my God, they want to get rid of vaccinations on children, and how dare they do that? So Canada doubled down. Canada did the complete opposite, even though Florida was on the right path. That Florida was onto something. I caught onto it, but our response was, no, if America's doing that, we got to do the opposite. It's such a backward-ass, loony insanity. Utter insanity. And you wonder why I think this trade war is an utter joke. It's all theatrics, because you see Mark Carney go down to Washington and laugh and giggle with Trump. We're supposed to be hating each other, aren't we? We're supposed to be upset that tariffs are destroying our industries and how devastating it is, but here's Mark Carney. Oh, buddy. It's such an utter disgrace. But even more with this. So that was a simple question that she's not going to respond to. She giggled at the start, so she knows exactly what he's talking about. But not going to answer the question and being told to move along.
Trade negotiations?
Prochaine question, merci.
That's my question. Don't you think it would be helpful to have a friend?
Next reporter, merci.
Oh, you're not going to answer, Minister?
Prochaine question, merci.
I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?
Next question, thank you.
Minister, Did I miss an answer? I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Literally, you could just make up something. I know you're full of crap. I know this minister's full of crap. And this just proves it. This proves how complicit she is. She knows exactly what Ezra Levant's talking about. She knows exactly about this ostrich farm situation. She knows exactly. She giggled. She smirked. She laughed at the mention of the ostrich farm, but doesn't answer the question, which shows exactly how complicit she is to the big agenda of big pharmaceuticals. And those are the perpetrators that are really going after these ostriches, because it's not about food. These ostriches are not being raised for food production, but they are being raised for science. And you think that medical testing on animals would be right up their alley. You would think that'd be the case. You would think that it'd be favorable for them that they did testing on animals. But no. No. Because these animals might be deterring away from big pharmaceuticals. And that does not sit well with the Canadian government. That does not sit well with the CFIA. That does not sit well with the RCMP. Because they're all massively corrupted to the tone of big pharmaceuticals. Like I said, even at this point, they're still recommending, they're still demanding people to get boosters for COVID at this time. The choice is yours. I'm not, again, according to YouTube science, very safe and effective. You make the decision yourself. But I just find it hilarious that in late 2025, after all we've been through, after everything we exposed, they still want to push it. Just so disgusting. This whole scandal and whatnot. So if you want to look into this more and you want to help the ostrich, go to savetheostriches.com for resources on that. And we'll try to keep up as much as possible, but it's so depressing.